Hello, hello. This is Irina. This is our podcast, Diabetically Speaking with SmartMove360. And welcome back. Welcome back and welcome for the first time visitors. This is the podcast where we meeting with people of all walks of life and talking about life from the diabetic standpoint. It could be you live this diabetic life or you helping someone who has this diagnosis, and we have all different perspectives and conversations will be going about life with diabetes and how we can help ourselves, what we can do, what tricks we can use, what tips we can use, what help we can use. And today, to help me with this conversation, I have a very, very special guest. I got to know Dr. Jelena Shah about a year ago in a networking group. Then our mutual friend connected us, and what a help she is to our group, to our community. She is a clinical pharmacist and holistic diabetic health coach for people with type 2 diabetes or pre-diabetics. And she is focusing on the root causes or by attending to the emotional and mental aspects of the disease. She has helped hundreds of patients low blood sugars, lose weight, and take fewer medications so they can live their happiest and healthiest life. Welcome, Dr. Jelena, to our
Oh
conversation.
my gosh, I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
I am very happy that you found time to be our first, not one of, but one and only the first medical professional on our young podcast. I am sure that we will see you again because we are going to change topics of conversations, and I personally would like to hear your opinion about all this. I have already a list of things, so we definitely will meet again.
Oh
For
my gosh.
today, for today, we will be talking about the topic of the month of February, and this is change. For me, this is a big change. I haven't been a podcaster and never thought about being a podcaster. And in month of February, with the help, support, and push from my very dear friends and partners, I am now speaking on podcast every Thursday at 4 p.m. Eastern Time. So, talking about change, this was a big change for me. I also know that a lot of times people who the diagnosis of diabetes, they understand that something has to be done. Something has to be changed because they don't want to have this progression moving this direction. They feel that something needs to be changed, but not always know what to do. So I wanted to ask Dr. Shaw, why change? Why should they change? Why should we change when we receive different diagnoses, and particularly type 2 diabetes?
Wow, that's such a great question. So, first of all, let's acknowledge that change is for a lot of us really scary because there is an amount of uncertainty that feels so unbelievably uncomfortable. And I like to remind myself because I'm not a big fan of change or hadn't been for a long time. So I had to remind myself that change is an opportunity for growth. It's the fastest way you can grow. It's the fastest way you can get insight on yourself and the fastest way to to go into a transition and to try something new because you're almost sometimes, especially with like a diagnosis of type 2 diabetes, you're kind of forced into making a decision of going down a path of keeping everything the same and knowing you're going to progress and your health may actually worsen, or an opportunity to take this diagnosis as difficult as it is, and use it as an opportunity to become the healthiest and happiest version of yourself. So, change is really important to have because it fuels the fire for us to become the people that we were meant to be.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you. Well, something that we discussed last week, we had our agent of change being interviewed, and Monica Henderson, and she mentioned that something, I totally agree with her on that, something that resisting the change, right? And we also, when we get the diagnosis, we never think about it in a positive way. We immediately start grieving our life that we had. And primarily it's related to food, because I will not agree that anyone would be grieving the fact that they couldn't walk long enough, that they couldn't sleep well, that they couldn't perform different activities because they have this health challenge. So that part people don't grieve. What they usually talking about, that they have to give up food, this kind of food, and they focus on it primarily. They don't, unfortunately, switch their mind to something else. And I totally understand. Eating is such a big part of our lives, and we, from the young age, were stimulated by different treats and was celebrating events and family gathering and friends gathering. It's all about around the table, and we share our experiences, recipes, food that we prepared and brought to the party or whatever. So our culture, doesn't matter what culture you are from, our human culture is around the food and how we eat. But this is not all we have, right? So we got to learn how to embrace the change. How can we actually sort of celebrate the fact that we need to change and what it will bring to our lives? So the question for you would be, what would you recommend to people who got diagnosed recently, for their family members? What are the tricks? How they could embrace it? How they could help themselves and embrace the change and do it?
So, first, I would say, yeah, give yourself a lot of time to grieve because a lot of us do treat food. It's like you said, food has such a cultural component. For a lot of us, we use it for celebrations or when we actually are grieving or when things are happening in our life. And so, food is a very much a part of our lives. And unlike like other things that we may do in our life, like some people smoke or do recreational drugs or drink alcohol, if you don't want to participate in those types of activities anymore, or you know it's doing you harm and you can just stop. But with food, that's not an option. You have to eat every day. And so I think, first of all, you can grieve that your life is changing and we want to feel our feelings as they come up and not suppress them. But the other thing to remember is when you go through the process of grieving is how are you actually looking at your food? Because if you are looking at food as a friend, that's where we tend to get ourselves into trouble. When we treat food as a source of comfort, because don't get me wrong, it's there for us when we need it. It feels so good. We're having a bad day. We're like, oh, we deserve this pie. I had a rough day. I'm so stressed out. The team won. We're gonna go out for pizza. Like we decide that we add these attachments to the food, and for a moment, I mean, physiologically, I'm not gonna lie to you, it does make you feel better. And we want to acknowledge that fact as well, because our body does release a hormone called dopamine, which is a pleasure hormone. So trust and believe every time you pick up that piece of bread and it's on the table, the warm bread at the restaurant, and you put it in your mouth in that moment of euphoria and bliss, that it hits your lips and you're like, oh, this feels so good. That's a real effect. That's dopamine. So it actually does feel good to eat these foods. So a lot of us will treat food, especially comfort foods. Like we're talking about the highly processed, like the good stuff, like the cookies and the chips and the mashed potatoes and the pizzas. We love those kinds of foods because it releases that dopamine hit. And when we're having a bad day, or we're feeling lonely, or we're bored, or we're stressed, and we eat that food for a moment, we do feel better. The problem is that food isn't really your friend, because you wait 5 or 10 minutes and what's going to happen? 5 or 10 minutes later, that feeling is gone. The dopamine is gone. And here we are back to feeling how we originally felt, which is sad, stressed, bored, depressed, angry, whatever it was. And now on top of that, now it's food's become a loan shark because now we've compounded interest. Now we also feel the shame and the guilt for not fueling our body with foods that we knew aren't doing us any favors. So the thing I like to say is like, yes, grieve that time, but also understand that it's time to really reevaluate your relationship with food. So that's my big recommendation is it's an opportunity to reevaluate your relationship with food and really think about how you will be able to make changes and what kind of changes, like what type of person do you want to show up a year from now? What type of person do you want to be 3 years from now? Because this is an opportunity and a chance to look and become the person that you feel like you want to be deep down inside. So here's your chance to really look into it. And right now, you may not have gratitude for that diagnosis because I sure as heck wouldn't. I get that. But with gratitude comes sometimes, if anyone remembers, like I'm sure everyone here has had a point in their life where things have been so hard and it was so awful at that moment. And we couldn't see why we were going through what we were going through. But a lot of times, a year later, 2 years later, 10 years later, we look back and we're like, wow, if that hadn't happened, I wouldn't have experienced X, Y, and Z. I wouldn't have realized how resilient I was. I wouldn't have seen how strong I was. I wouldn't have known I had a great support system and called upon all the sides of myself that are so unbelievably strong and wonderful and great. And I wouldn't have had this experience and I wouldn't have met that person. So we may not be able to appreciate it now. You may not be able to have your gratitude at the moment, but have faith that it does have meaning and you get to assign that meaning later down the road. You don't have to do it now.
Yes, that's actually happens so often. And thank you for pointing out that we do need to go through those grieving processes, right? It's
Yeah.
it's like a circle of life Monica was talking about last time. When we receive the diagnosis, we have to analyze the situation where we
Yeah.
happen to be, to see what we want to leave, to keep from what we have, and what we really don't need, right? What we can change, what we can replace, what we can do differently, right? And then from there, we could go to start working on it. And that's the change. And doing that change, it actually brings those things that we actually were dreaming about, right? If I didn't learn how to play tennis, if I didn't put my racket in my hand, I will not have a joy of going to the match and play the game with the other people and enjoy the victory or enjoy just camaraderie because our team all together we maybe won, maybe just traveled to another part of town. It was fun that we had. If I didn't learn how to
Yeah.
play, I wouldn't have it.
Or if you hadn't gone through a heartbreak, like if you didn't go through that heartbreak in your life, maybe that heartbreak taught you something about yourself that you weren't meeting your needs in some kind of way. And then if you hadn't broken up with that person, you wouldn't have been able to meet the love of your life after. We, we can't see sometimes what's on the other side of our grief, of our pain, and what's on the other side especially when we feel forced to change. When we feel forced to change, it is really, really hard sometimes because we're like, we do it kicking and screaming. It's like, well, I didn't want to do this. This is my life was fine. I didn't want you. But then the universe is like, or your higher self or God or whatever you want to call it comes in and is like, yeah, no, we're going to go ahead and mix things up a little bit. So hang on tight, little pumpkin. We're going for a ride. And so it also makes life so interesting. This is why it's hard to see at the time, but man, your life would be so dull if you just went in a straight line all the time. We need these little pivots and dips and valleys and hills.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And that's something that I keep repeating this because I see those posts in our big group, Diabetes 101 for Beginners. And I also saw it in different places as well, in interviews with people when they are saying that this diagnosis, the diabetes, this was the last straw
Mhm.
that forced them
Mhm.
to make this change. They
Mhm.
knew already that, well, the scale is showing that something is going on in the wrong direction. The way how I feel always tired, the way how I don't sleep, how irritated I am, it doesn't feel good. Something needs to be changed. I understand this trip to McDonald's, another one, and this big fry and on this big Coke. I shouldn't be doing this, but it's so much easier. And I know, and when I walk into this place, they're already asking the usual, and I feel like they feel me. This is all kind of goes together, right? Then, when they got the diagnosis and they knew that they should do, and they started finally doing this, they got to experience all sort of different emotions and experiences. When they lost weight, they were able to go on a trip with their friends because the this was a lot of walking there, and they before this they wouldn't even attempt because they couldn't walk. Now they could do walking. Some people, after they got their blood sugar under control, they started sleeping better, and that allowed them to be more active during the day, so they were able to do more of household chores, or at work, whatever they were working. So all this helped them, and that's something that I personally think that we need to think about. What these changes, they're hard, but what will be my payoff?
Well, here, let me tell
Will I be
you. Yeah.
struggling, or I
Yeah.
will be benefit from it?
If I can nerd out on you, because listen, I am a pharmacist, so I cannot help myself, and I love anything to do with science. I'm gonna nerd out on you, but in our brains, why it changes so hard is because we have these little transmitters in our brain, and they're called neurons. And when they go down a path 1,000 times, if you imagine a trail, it's like this well trodden road. You've seen those trails where thousands of people have been down. There's not a branch out of place. So every boulder, there's not a boulder in sight, right? Like you know where to walk. Your neurotransmitters are the same thing. And we talk about energy. It takes our bodies want to use the least amount of energy needed. So we go down those same pathways because it is the least amount of energy needed. We know to go down that path, to go it. Now, change is hard because what you're doing is when you're deciding to change, you're telling your little neuron in there that's used to going down that well trodden trail that, hey, I'm going to have you look over here. And you see where there is no trail. You see where all the trees are in the way. You see all these boulders. I'm going to have you try to make a new trail. And your little neuron, he's like, yeah, no, I don't want to do that. I'm not interested because this looks hard. I'm going to have to carry a machete. I'm going to have dirt all over me. I can't even see this trail. We may have to go uphill. I don't even know where this goes. It's going to be a lot harder. But what people forget is that you can travel down this new path 1,000 times, and we can then be the new trodden trail. Like it could be the new trail that you take every time. And so every time you go down that trail, your neuron remembers. And he doesn't need to cut down the tree branch that was in the way because you did that last week. He doesn't need to move the boulder because you did that yesterday. And so we keep going down that train, it will become second nature. But this is why doing a change and being consistent with it matters, because even something small, as long as you're consistent, at the end of the day, will have a big impact. It just might not feel like it in that day. But that's why always say, take small incremental changes, because over a long period, you're going to look back in a year and you're like, I've been doing this thing for a year now. I cannot believe it. That
definitely. Consistency. It's like I am preaching this all the time. Consistency is the key. Even small,
Mhm.
small steps,
Yeah.
small, small changes, micro changes
Yeah.
done consistently will bring the result.
Yes.
But if you try to do something massive in one move, you may succeed and
Mhm.
great for you. Now try to keep it working.
Yeah.
But very often you may actually, because it's so massive,
Mhm.
not everybody can pull off this big project right away. And then it becomes like, oh no, it wasn't for me. It didn't work for me. This regime doesn't work for me. This diet doesn't work for
Mhm.
me. This food doesn't work for me. All this doesn't work for me. This is too much. So with that, let's talk about how can we start change. We discussed about how important it is, how hard it
Mhm.
is, but how can we start it so it will stay with us?
I say we do small incremental changes. Those are the things to do because when you start off small and you just do something like you said every day, it might not feel like a lot, but then it also doesn't feel overwhelming. So you start off small every day. And also, the other thing I like to say is like after you've been doing it for like a couple days, a week, a month, that you take the time and you look back because a lot of us get hyper focused on a goal. And goals are great. I do advocate for a goal, but a goal is like a horizon. We keep walking to the horizon, and the horizon never actually gets closer because we always a goal is a moving target. It moves further and further out because as soon as we reach, it's called the hedonic treadmill, but we reach a goal and then we get to a point where we're like, oh, but I got to get to this next point, and we very rarely take the time to celebrate. So the big thing is have the goal, but also take the time to look back from where you came from, because that's going to give you the best idea of how far you've come so that you can celebrate. Like, you know what, 2 weeks ago I had 5 extra pounds on me. 2 weeks ago, my blood sugars were in the 200s. Now they're in the 180s. 2 weeks ago, like, they're coming down. It may not be exactly where you want them yet, but if you pay attention, like where you're standing from, and you look back, that is a better representation of how far you've come rather than standing where you are and looking out to the horizon, because that can get discouraging after a while.
Yeah, absolutely. And something that I wanted to point out that uh, looking back is very
Yes.
important. Absolutely, you got to know how far you've
Yeah.
got. The most important thing when you're doing it, don't look to the right or to the left. My neighbor, my friend,
Mhm.
my relative, how far they've got. Because we are all of us individuals, and our progress is our progress. And maybe for me to be able to report that I, for the last month, every single day, went out and was making those 5,000 steps
Mhm.
every single
Mhm.
day. For some people, it would be, I'm proud of it, and look at that. I got more active.
Yeah.
I lost, it helped me to lose some pounds. I feel better. My blood sugar
Yeah.
readings are better, right? But for somebody else, this is like nothing, and they do 10,000
Yes.
steps. But they are different. They started
Yeah.
from different places.
Yeah.
So be and compare it to
Yes.
yourself.
Yeah. I also want to say the other thing I really believe in is to invest in the process and not in the outcome, because the outcome
Hmm.
is based on the future. The outcome can be influenced by many external factors, your hormones. You might have all these goals, but maybe you sprain your ankle, maybe something happens, life happens. So you want to have an outcome, but don't attach yourself to the outcome. Attach yourself to the process, because the process is empowering. It's what you can do now. So it gives us the ability to be able to do what we need to do in the moment. And as you invest in the process, the natural byproduct is going to be the outcome. And it usually heavily influences the outcome. You're going to have the best chance to have that outcome if you invest in the process rather than focusing on the outcome.
Absolutely. This week, I was listening to someone very smart, and they were talking about um, like creating new routine, creating some new habits, and their recommendation was, because changes are so difficult, because our those neurons going in the direction we accustomed to, all this, understanding all this, start making changes, start activities that do not take more than 2 minutes, whatever it is. If it is longer than 2 minutes, then see how you can shorten it.
Mhm.
Maybe instead of doing 5,000 steps, there's no way you could do 5,000 steps in 2 minutes. So, but 2 minutes of little shoulder movements in front of the mirror, you
Or
can do that.
dancing, you move your
Dancing,
body.
you could
Yeah,
do
yeah.
that.
Turn the music on. Yeah.
Yes, sometimes you need to just start with a glass of water, and it
Mhm.
takes 2 minutes to get
Yeah.
to the whatever place you pouring your water from. Pour it in, drink it. It will take 2 minutes, and if you can implement it on a regular basis every single day, sometimes it becomes. I mean, eventually it becomes your, second nature. And when you look back and recognize that, you're like, oh, I did that. What else can
Yeah.
I do?
Yeah. You can just do a habit tracker. We are very visual creatures. So if you make a list like Monday through Friday, I'm going to walk, and you do your walk and you check it off and you put it on your fridge every day. It sounds like something so silly and small, but I tell you, it does some. You want a natural dopamine hit that doesn't come from a carbohydrate? That's one way. Check off something from your to-do list. So that's that's a free one, you guys. That one's it's a free way to get like a good feel good hormone in.
Well, I just thought about the calendar when my kids were young, and we were tracking their activities, like math math activities. Every day you have to fix, resolve 4 problems. And if you did that, take a little star sticker and put it on
Yes.
this day. So at the end of the day, they were so, I mean, at the end of the month, Mom, look, the whole month I have those stars, like the whole entire
We
month.
have not evolved from those 5-year-old versions of ourselves, by the way. So we still love that. Like, I would love a star sticker all the time. So I say still do it to this day. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, that is actually, we are getting close to the end of our conversation. We have 2 minutes left. And I wanted to ask you, Dr. Jelena Shaw,
Yes.
please share with our listeners how they can connect with you, where they can find you. Because I know in our group, people already chasing you, they're following you. So I hope today more people will be able
Oh,
to
thank you.
look you up and see how they can find you.
Yes, I'm on all sorts of social media outlets. You can find everything on my link tree. I'm on TikTok, and all of the links are in the link tree, including my Facebook page, which is under Jaylena Shaw Consulting. My Instagram is also Jaylena Shaw Consulting, and then I'm Dr. Sugar Bomb on on TikTok. So there's lots of places. I've got lots of fun resources. I love to hear from anyone that has questions. It's one of my favorite things to do. So please, yeah, reach out. Let me know what you're thinking, what you need help with, and I just want to be there to help any way I can.
Excellent. Thank you. And as for myself, I just wanted to remind everyone that this is the podcast, Diabetically Speaking with SmartMove 360. So you can find more information about us on Move 360 webpage, on Smart Move 360 Facebook group, Diabetes 101 for Beginners uh, Facebook group. We are going to have on the 25th of March, we will going to have an expo where Dr. Jelena will be talking. And we are having our podcast every Thursday at 4 p.m. Eastern Time. Thank you very much for joining us. Thank you, Dr. Shaw, for joining me, and
Yes.
we'll talk to you next time.